You keep telling yourself you're fine. You wake up, you function, you reply to messages, you get through the day. From the outside, it probably looks like you're moving forward, but inside, there's this quiet pressure, this feeling that everyone else is somehow ahead of you, that they figured life out faster, that you missed a step somewhere, and now you're permanently behind. But what if that story isn't true? What if you're not behind at all? What if what looks like slowness is actually healing? Nobody really talks about this part, the part where growth doesn't look impressive, where progress doesn't come with applause or visible milestones. Healing is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post updates. It works quietly, beneath the surface, repairing things that broke when you were just trying to survive. You didn't stop because you were weak. You stopped because something inside you needed attention. There was a time when you pushed through everything. You ignored the exhaustion. You swallowed the disappointment. You kept going even when your body and heart were asking you to slow down. People admired your strength back then. They called you resilient, reliable, strong, but no one asked what it cost you to be that person. And eventually, something gave way. Maybe it wasn't dramatic. Maybe there wasn't a single breaking point. Just a slow realization that you couldn't keep living on borrowed energy. That the version of you who could carry everything no longer existed, and pretending otherwise was destroying you from the inside. So you slowed down. And that's when the guilt started. You watched others move ahead, new jobs, relationships, achievements, confidence. Meanwhile, you felt stuck, paused, like life kept moving while you were standing still. You told yourself you were falling behind, that you wasted time, that you should be further along by now. But what you didn't realize was this: you weren't standing still. You were turning inward. Healing doesn't look like success at first. It looks like confusion. It looks like rest that feels undeserved. It looks like questioning everything you once accepted. You started noticing patterns you used to ignore. The way you abandoned yourself to keep others comfortable. The way you tied your worth to productivity, approval, or being needed. That awareness didn't come for free. It came because something inside you finally demanded honesty. You're not behind because you're lazy. You're not behind because you failed. You're not behind because you weren't capable. You're behind schedule only according to a timeline that never considered your pain. The truth is, you're doing something most people postpone their entire lives. You're facing yourself. You're sitting with discomfort instead of numbing it. You're unlearning survival habits that once kept you safe but no longer serve you. That takes time. And it takes courage. You had to dismantle parts of your identity, parts that were built around pleasing, achieving, enduring. You had to grieve versions of yourself that no longer fit. You had to accept that healing isn't linear, that some days you feel strong, and other days you feel like you're back at the beginning. That doesn't mean it isn't working. It means it's real. If you're honest, you're not the same person you were a year ago. You notice things differently. You react differently. You don't tolerate what you once normalized. You feel deeper, even if that depth feels heavy right now. That's not regression. That's integration. You're learning how to live without constantly being in survival mode. You're teaching your nervous system that it doesn't always have to be on guard. You're rebuilding trust with yourself slowly, carefully, without forcing it. And yes, it feels slow, because rushing is what hurt you in the first place. Everyone praises speed, hustle, momentum, but no one warns you what happens when you move fast with unhealed wounds. You don't arrive whole, you arrive fractured, carrying pain into places it doesn't belong. You chose a different path, and it's quieter. There are moments when you doubt it, when you wonder if you should just push harder, ignore the ache, and catch up, when you feel embarrassed explaining where you are in life, when you compare your inner rebuilding to someone else's outer success, but comparison can't see what's happening beneath the surface. It can't see the strength it took for you to stop running. It can't see the nights you sat with emotions you once avoided. It can't see the boundaries you're learning to set. Even when it costs you comfort, healing doesn't make you impressive. It makes you honest. And honesty changes everything. Right now, you're laying foundations. Quiet ones. The kind that don't show until something real is built on top of them. You're learning who you are without pressure, without constant performance, without proving your worth. That's not being behind. That's preparing for a life that won't break you again. And in the next part, we'll talk about what happens when healing starts to turn into strength, when the slowness you hate begins to feel like stability, and the version of you that emerges is stronger than the one who rushed ahead without rest. There comes a moment in healing that no one prepares you for. It's the moment when you realize you're no longer desperate to go back to who you were, but you're also not sure who you're becoming yet. That in-between space can feel unsettling. You don't recognize yourself fully, and the old version no longer fits. It feels like standing on unfinished ground, unsure if it will hold your weight. This is where many people panic. They mistake discomfort for failure. They assume uncertainty means something is wrong. They rush themselves out of healing. Because the unfamiliar, silence feels scarier than familiar pain. But you stayed, even when it felt lonely, even when it felt slow, even when you wondered if you were wasting time. And that choice matters more than you know. Because healing doesn't just remove pain, yet rearranges your values. It quietly changes what you tolerate, what you chase, and what you no longer beg for. You start noticing how your body responds to situations. You feel tension where you once felt obligation. You sense peace where you once felt guilt. And slowly, almost without announcing itself, clarity begins to form. You realize you don't actually want the life you once envied. You don't want the pace that burned you out. You don't want relationships that require self-abandonment. You don't want success that costs your health or identity. What you want now is something steadier, something real. That's when healing turns into strength. Not loud strength, not the kind that proves itself, but grounded strengths, the kind that doesn't need permission. You stop explaining yourself as much. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop chasing closure from people who never gave you safety in the first place. You begin to trust your timing. And that trust is powerful. Because once you stop measuring your life against timelines that ignored your pain, something shifts. You start moving again, but differently. With intention instead of panic. With boundaries instead of endurance. With self-respect instead of desperation. You may still move slower than others, but you move whole, and that changes everything. You don't rebuild your life on adrenaline anymore. You rebuild it on you ask better questions. You listen to your limits. You choose environments that don't require armor. You notice how much lighter you feel when you're not constantly bracing for disappointment. The truth is, many people who look ahead of you are running on unresolved wounds. They're productive, successful, admired, but exhausted. They haven't stopped long enough to ask if the life they're building actually fits them. You did. That's not falling behind. That's breaking a cycle. Healing teaches you patience not because you want to wait, but because you no longer want to repeat the same pain in a different form. You understand now that rushing won't save you. Ignoring yourself won't make things better. Only honesty will. And you've been honest. You admitted you were tired. You admitted something wasn't working. You admitted you needed time. That admission wasn't weakness. It was the moment your life began to change direction. There will still be days when doubt creeps in. Days when you feel behind again. Days when old voices try to rush you, shame you, compare you. But now you recognize those voices for what they are. Echoes of a system that values speed over well-being, output over humanity. You don't live there anymore. You're learning how to choose alignment over approval, peace over performance, depth over distraction. And that learning doesn't end, it matures. One day, without realizing when it happened, you'll notice how stable you feel. How you respond instead of react. How you don't collapse at the first sign of pressure. How you trust yourself to handle life without betraying yourself. That's when you'll understand something clearly. You were never behind. You were becoming someone who wouldn't abandon themselves again. And the life you're building now solely, intentionally, honestly will last. It won't be impressive to everyone. It won't follow the expected order. But it will be yours. And it will be strong enough to hold you. Healing didn't delay your life. It prepared you for a better one. So if you're still here, still taking your time, still piecing yourself together, Quietly stop apologizing. Stop explaining. Stop comparing. You're not behind. You're healing, and that might be the most important work you'll ever do.